This is Environmental Science 1, Chapter 4, Part 3 on kinds of ecosystems. In this portion of the video lecture, we will be discussing the different types of freshwater ecosystems. Freshwater ecosystems are things like lakes and ponds and rivers and streams. The light and the depth of the water are really going to determine what types of plant life can live in that water, and of course plant life determines what type of animal life lives in that area. Also the water velocity, the level of nutrients in the freshwater ecosystem, and the levels of oxygen can also determine plant and animal life. So in lakes and ponds, the regions, when we talk about the littoral zone, those are areas that are near the shoreline. So different types of plants and animals live in the littoral zone than do in the pelagic zone. The pelagic zone is kind of the open water of the lake or pond that's not surrounded by a shoreline. The benthic zone, that's the bottom of the lake or the pond. There's very little available light depending on how deep the pond is. And if it is a very large lake, the profundal zone is the very darkest, deepest part of that lake. The photic zone, remember photo in Latin means light. So the photic zone is the area that the sunlight can reach down through the water column. In most places, it's around 100 meters. Of course, the different types of plant and animal life can influence that a little bit, pollution rates, but generally about 100 meters the sunlight can reach through. Lakes that are eutrophic. When we talk about, remember, trophic means energy. In this case, with the biological productivity, a eutrophic lake has a very high nutrient and high productivity level. Eutrophic lakes tend to be pretty warm and they're on the shallow or smaller side. Some fish that reside in eutrophic lakes are bass, perch, pike, and carp. An oligotrophic lake, this is a lake with a very low nutrient level and low productivity. Oligotrophic lakes tend to be a lot colder and deeper. Some fish that tend to reside in oligotrophic lakes are the trout or the whitefish. And some lakes and streams are kind of in the middle for nutrients and productivity, and we call those mesotrophic lakes. Many lakes in northern Minnesota are mesotrophic. Walleye are very common in mesotrophic lakes, as well as whitefish. Wetlands are a particular type of freshwater ecosystem that is very special. It is areas, of course, that are surrounding very low-lying areas where we have a lot of standing water. Fish use wetlands for feeding grounds, or in some cases, with some species of fish, they use it to spawn or lay their eggs. Many birds use wetlands for their nesting sites. Wetlands have many laws for protection nowadays. Wetlands are important because they act like a filter. It's almost like a Brita water filter that can remove pollutants from the water in the area of the wetland. So some of the trees and the plants that live there can take a little bit of toxins, and they do so into their roots. Wetlands can also help control flooding in other areas. Vegetation will trap carbon that would normally otherwise be released as carbon dioxide. So wetlands are very important as a kind of a filtering process for freshwater ecosystems. Marshes are a particular type of wetland. A marsh has a lot of non-woody plants. So lots of lily pads, lots of grasses. Marshes cover a very large area, And the water that's in a marsh is what we call stagnant. So it does not move very much. So marshes don't have currents. Types of marshes, areas of wetlands where you have marshes that are near marine ecosystems can be brackish or slightly saline. So a brackish marsh is a little bit saltier than a freshwater marsh, but not as salty as the ocean itself. A tidal marsh is totally saline. So there's more salt water than there is fresh water in a tidal wetland. Swamps are another type of wetland that's very important. Here is where you're actually going to have some trees and shrubs. Swamps tend to occur on very flat land that's poorly drained. There's nowhere for the water to go, so the water kind of builds up in one area. Threats to wetlands, whether they be swamps or marshes, draining and clearing, mostly for human development as well as infrastructure. Many wetlands, for example, in areas of Florida and Louisiana, are drained for home development. Habitat destruction is another threat to wetlands. There are many different plants and animals that live in wetlands that can live nowhere else. Wetlands have a very high biodiversity. And so when those areas are drained, when the water goes away, those plants and animals cannot adapt fast enough, so they either have to move or not survive. Rivers for freshwater ecosystems, kind of the anatomy of a river, if you will. The headwaters, or sometimes it's called the source of the river. The water tends to be very cold. It's got a lot of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in it, as well as fast moving. Towards the end of a river, sometimes it's called the mouth, the water warms and it slows a little bit, and the oxygen levels are decreased a little bit as well. For plant and animal adaptations in a river, the velocity or the speed of the water is going to determine really what can live in a particular area of a river. So plants in particular, the speed of the water determines the plant type. Some plants are more floating on top of the water, and they can't take a lot of strong current of the river. Some plants that are kind of in the middle can deal with a little bit of current. And of course, those plants that are totally submerged have the strongest root system, so they can deal with the fastest of currents. Obviously, animal adaptations. Animals need to be able to swim in different water speeds and currents. So most of the life of a river is also near the littoral zone or near the shore. Threats to rivers. Of course, we have pollution from either industry or recreation. Marinas in recreational areas of rivers or lakes have some problems with the fluids from recreational boats or other vehicles, jet skis and the like, leaking into the water. Rivers and lakes and ponds near agricultural areas are usually a little bit more having a little bit more of pesticide or herbicides types of pollutants in them, because they are so close to an agricultural field that water runs off the field and goes into the lakes and rivers and streams. Dam building is another threat to rivers. Usually dams are built for the purpose of human development. When the dam is built, there is a reservoir that is created behind it. So a lake, an artificial lake, is created. And then downstream really is where the majority of the problems are going to be for those plants and animals that depend on the size and the speed of that water for their ecological niche. This has been Environmental Science 1, Chapter 4, Part 3 of Freshwater Ecosystem.